I'm at a loss for words. Evil Dead 2 was released in 1982 and is the follow-up to Sam Raimi's first installment, Evil Dead. It centers around the events of an isolated cabin when forces of evil are accidentally unleashed upon a man who has one interesting night ahead of him. Okay, so here's what I knew about this movie going in. I knew it was directed by Sam Raimi, I knew that it was a cult classic, and I knew it for this meme. That's it. I saw Evil Dead on a whim one night, and I loved it. I loved how claustrophobic it was. I loved the buckets and buckets of gore. I even thought the much dated practical effects made it way creepier than anything I see in horror movies today. I knew I wanted my second October review to be something classic that I had never seen before, but for the most part, I thought I knew what to expect going into this movie, having seen the first one, but I was wrong. Nothing could have prepared me for this movie. There's a lot to talk about, so I won't waste any more time. Let's get right into story. Our story opens on Ash Williams and his girlfriend, you don't need to know her name, as they make their way to a secluded cabin in the woods. Unbeknownst to Ash, this will be his second outing to a cabin housing evil waiting to be unleashed. Turns out it belongs to a pair of anthropologists who have been studying the Necronomicon, which is not a convention for necromancers, but a cursed book of the dead. Things rather quickly go to shit when Ash stumbles upon an old set of recordings that, once again, release an unspeakable evil. When his girlfriend is killed, again, Ash is pitted against the cursed cabin of madness that will stop at nothing to both torment and destroy him. When anthropologist Annie shows up to finish the work her father started, she and Ash must make it out alive to rid the cabin of the evil dead. Man, when this sequel hit theaters in '82, people must have had some questions. First, Ash, didn't you have kind of a stressful time at the last cabin you visited? Is this really your first choice where to bring your girlfriend? Second, why are you playing with mysterious recorded media again? And third, didn't you, die? Okay, time out. It had been a little while since I saw the first Evil Dead movie, and upon watching this, it didn't really take me that long to realize that something wasn't really adding up. I did a bit of research into this, and in an interview with Bloody Disgusting, Bruce Campbell kind of clarifies why the continuity of this is just a big ol' mess. Basically, it had to do with creative rights. Link to the article in the description below if you're interested. According to Campbell, this movie was never really intended to be a straight-up continuation of the first movie, but more of a requel. Well, I didn't know that, so that was just whoosh. It's unfortunate because right after you get the title card, there's this pretty glaring detail you're just supposed to get past unless you know what to expect. It's a little distracting. Although the confusion has a reason that I'm sure a lot of people nowadays are very aware of, I'm not sure that's enough to give this movie's story a free pass. I was confused. And even if you take all that and set it aside and take this movie as its own fresh start, there's still the matter of the bonkers pacing. It's like, enter our lead hero. Enter the hero's lover. Open on our mysterious whoop, she's possessed. A mere 6 minutes into the hour and 24-minute runtime, and all hell has officially broken loose. Who are these people? What are they like? What brought them to this secluded and possessed? It's all done so quickly, it can leave you asking, wait, what? Doesn't make it any less enjoyable, except what? At least in the first movie, you got kind of a little bit of context into the horror you were about to be enjoying. Okay, but I'm not an idiot. This movie has blood geysers and a hero who straps a chainsaw to his arm. It's not supposed to be taken too seriously. But while the movie gives you just enough to make a very simple point A to point B plot, there's not quite enough to keep you from feeling that maybe you missed something along the breakneck ride. But here's the thing. I think that's what makes watching Evil Dead 2 such a bizarrely unique experience. And maybe that's part of the reason why it's reached cult status. There's no easing into the plot, no break in the tension, no time to catch your breath, just enough time to hold on to something before the next cuckoo bananas thing flies at you. You're in Pee-wee's fucked up playhouse. Have fun and don't ask questions. And I can't talk about the story without talking about the ending, so spoilers. After a relentless onslaught of horrific nonsense, Annie finally manages to read aloud from the Necronomicon. This opens a wormhole which sucks away the evil and unfortunately takes Ash with it. Our story ends with Ash back in medieval times, revealing that he was the prophesied savior from the book, leaving our hero trapped in a strange time and us on one mind-bending cliffhanger. This story, in a word, gives no fucks. And yes, at times that means it can feel like a bit of a mess. But while it may be a little unconventional, while it may break every definition of the term sequel, once you accept the madness, it turns into an experience that is anything but forgettable. Characters. Let's talk about characters. The horror genre is not known for being the most character-driven. In fact, some subgenres of horror are so notorious for having characters so vapid that you just wait gleefully and make predictions on which characters are gonna die first. While this isn't exactly a slasher film in which the characters are just there to fill a body count, it's not exactly the character-driven fare that Shaun of the Dead would be either. Of course, our lead character Ash has his own special appeal. We'll get into that in a minute. But as fun as this film is, the characters are not where it derives its strength. In plain English, yeah, most of them are kind of bland. I wasn't kidding when I said you didn't need to know his girlfriend's name, or that whoever these people are just picked up along the way to be delivered to the slaughter. With most of the plot being centered around characters being possessed, or other characters surviving a shitstorm of evil, there's not really a lot of time devoted to making a reason for why we should care about some of these people. And while that lacking point may be seen as something totally unnecessary in a campy gore fest like this, I think it can also be seen as a missed opportunity. We're given a bit of backstory into Annie and her studies into the Book of the Dead, but while she's strong and eventually saves the day, she's really no more than a sidekick and expositional mouthpiece so we can understand more of the lore. Which leaves us with one of our two main characters, Ash. Bruce Campbell as Ash is one of the most endearingly bizarre, charmingly awkward performances you will ever see in your life. You don't care about Ash because of a deep understanding of who he is and his plight as a human being. You care about him because he's a badass. An awkward, bug-eyed, iron-willed maniac. Not only is he entertaining to watch, but as a character, he's also every bit as stubborn as this freaking demon cabin. He's made it this far, so what fresh hell is coming for him next, and how's he gonna deal with that? I can't wait to see. I said he's one of two main characters, not because of Annie, but because I'd argue the evil itself is a character. Whatever this immaterial, effed up force is, it has one goal in mind: drive its victim to a maddening death. It's manipulative, it's crafty, it's infectious. Seriously, if it can turn your own hand against you, what hope do you have? When you get down to it, all of the other characters are really just there to nudge Ash along on his journey to being a maniacal hero. It is all about Ash versus evil. He's what you're watching for, and doing so is never disappointing. Horror comedy. Let's just meditate on that phrase for a second. By nature, this is a genre that is based on something absurd, because it's a pretty odd experience to be terrified and also finding yourself laughing at the thing that's terrifying. There's gotta be a ton of subgenres within this subgenre, but for the sake of simplicity, I'll tell you how I lump them into two categories. One is the tongue-in-cheek variety of movies like Shaun of the Dead and Cabin in the Woods. These are the horror comedies that make me feel like I'm in on the joke, and usually the ones that I end up laughing up the most. And then there's the other shit. The absurd shit. The stuff like Too Many Cooks and Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, that gets under my skin because of how ridiculous it is. This is where Evil Dead 2 shines in all its ooey gooey corn syrupy glory. It's the strange and horrifying nonsense that fever dreams are made of, and there is nothing that is quite like it. The fact that everything Ash has to come face to face with is both menacing and silly takes away the sense of reason that would otherwise be comforting in the situation. Like, nothing should be comforting about the idea of an axe murderer, but what is that there's a possibility that you might be able to reason with him. How the flying fuck do you reason with this? The jarring sound design, breakneck tracking shots, disorienting angles, even the fact that it's filmed for the most part in one claustrophobic location lets you experience firsthand what Ash is going through. This makes all the campy goodness with Campbell oddly make sense. You want to see him go a little bit mad. You want to hear a spicy one-liner before he sends that thing back to hell. When the forces of evil are this ridiculous, how else do you answer but by strapping a chainsaw to your arm and becoming a ridiculous badass? And I should probably talk about the effects. The effects look fake, but they're so gloriously fake that they take on a certain creepiness and life all their own. Honestly, it helps distinguish it even today for its own ooey gooey gross aesthetic. Like, yeah, it looks fake, but dolls look fake. And those things are creepy. I've never seen a movie's tone be so singularly focused on driving you bananas. And it's not hard to see why people still enjoy it today. So how does Evil Dead 2 fare on the screen spectrum? All joking aside, this movie really did get under my skin. It was gross, funny, and scary all at once. It's just a really confusing mix of emotion. Do I laugh? Do I cry? I actually had a really hard time writing this review because there was just so much that I could talk about, and I could go on alone for hours and hours just about how I felt about this movie. And yet it has this campy, homemade, lovable quality that's just, like I said, just a very confusing mix of emotions. Guys, I hope you enjoyed my second Screen Spectrum review, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to see where some more movies fall on the Screen Spectrum. And seriously, if you find any mysterious recording things, just don't. Maybe play Jenga instead. That could be fun. What else is something fun to do aside from listen to mysterious recordings? Yeah, just like if you see them there and you think that could be fun, like what's an alternative?
Don't listen to the mysterious recordings?
That's a great idea. Yeah. Yeah.
What else could I do?
Yeah, like
nothing. I'm trapped. That's it.
That's it?
That's all you can do. Once it's playing, you can't turn it off.
No, you haven't started playing it.
It needs to be played eventually by someone.
I'd be the one that gets possessed.
Sucks.
It's not how I wanted that conversation to go.